All right, so mic check 1 2, mic check 1 2. This is Valentin Bura, and tonight we are going to talk a little bit in the beginning about Immanuel Kant, about Kantianism. Okay, so please bear with me on this one. I'm growing a beard over here, and my hair is growing too. I guess brushing it is advisable, so I've brushed my hair just before. Brushing it is always advisable. Trimming it is, in fact, denied by Leviticus, so you can't trim your hair or your beard. You can't do these things. That's forbidden by the book of Leviticus. It is not kosher to trim your beard or the sides of your head. So be mindful about these aspects. That repels angelic energy, so you will become weaker if you trim your beard or your hair. Okay? So back to the content. Back to tonight's content. I guess this is the first presentation for the evening. I'm not sure if I'm going to do another one. As it stands, I'm not prepared to talk to you about Wittgenstein. Okay, so Wittgenstein is something that I don't master. Okay? There exist two Wittgensteins, and I have issues with the first Wittgenstein, and I have issues with the second Wittgenstein. For example, in the first Wittgenstein, what does Wittgenstein refer to when he says this is an object? Okay, so what is an object in Wittgenstein? I do have this sort of issues, so I'm definitely not prepared to talk to you about Wittgenstein. Maybe I will. He's probably the most influential analytical thinker of the 20th century, okay? He developed, together with Bertrand Russell, Wittgenstein developed the school of analytical thought in philosophy. So, technically speaking, I will need to do a presentation on Wittgenstein eventually, but I'm still studying the topic, so bear with me on that one. So, tonight's discussion is on Immanuel Kant and Kantianism. Immanuel Kant, probably the greatest philosopher after Plato. Okay, so he's probably the most influential thinker in Western thought after Plato. Okay, so some people say that Plato and Socrates, some scholars want to discuss the history of philosophy as to say that Plato and Socrates were actually the same guy. They were actually the same person. I don't think that is the case, actually, because Plato added new things. So Plato discusses Socrates. Yes, that is true. Socrates is a main influence on Plato, but Plato added his main train of thought to Socrates, which is Platonism, the existence of a higher reality, the existence of an ideal reality. That's what Plato added. But tonight we're talking Immanuel Kant, we're talking Kantianism, and how Kantianism, which I wish to call, that's not the same as having innate qualities, that's post-Kantianism, guys. When I studied this topic, I managed to piss off a little bit my lecturer, because I call what I wish to call Immanuel Kant is a rationalist, a guy that's talking about reason. So the critique of pure reason, that's his main magnus opus, I guess. So that's how I call Immanuel Kant. I'm not calling him in any other way, and I'm distinguishing Kantianism to empiricism, okay? These two things should be distinguished. In my own philosophy, I am a quasi-empiricist, okay? I am an empiricist in what I do, in my approach, in how I view the world. I am an empiricist, though I must give credit to Immanuel Kant, and I must acknowledge the fact that some of Kant's assumptions are in fact correct, okay? So, some of his assumptions are correct. The assumptions being that we come in the world with faculties, okay? We do have faculties. Our being is not a blank page fully. We do come with faculties, though, mainly speaking, so that's the CPU, okay? That is the CPU, the faculties that we have, though the main hard drive may be empty, okay? So we need to build on these faculties, and that's why I am an empiricist mostly. Here it is, the contents. We only have 4 sections, 4 chapters on this discussion. It is mostly, these views are personal. It is how I've studied Immanuel Kant. It is how I understand Immanuel Kant and what I make of his thought. So, okay, be my guest if you want to develop your own particular views on the subject. So I'm going to give you an introduction, and I'm going to argue that Immanuel Kant is revolving mainly around his ethics project, and that is the idea of duty. Okay, that is Immanuel Kant. It was an ethics project, and well, as most thinkers, we should view him as reflecting the music of his times. Okay, so that is Immanuel Kant, an ethics project reflecting the music of the times. And in the second section, so they're more like sections, not chapters. I'm not talking extensively, I'm talking intensively, not extensively. So in the second section, I'm talking about metaphysics and epistemology. They are always related. Epistemology means the way we get to know things. Okay, that is epistemology. It is the theory of knowledge. It is about how we get to know things, mostly. Metaphysics refers to what is out there and basically whether we can know it or not. So we can see it goes hand in hand with epistemology. Metaphysics. So I've asked one of my lecturers once, and my question was, quote, end quote, what is metaphysics? That was intended as a joke, actually, because that's one of Heidegger's expositions. What is metaphysics? And he picked up the joke. He did give me the answer, and at the end he asked me if I speak German, and I said I don't. So then he said, well, QED. And he said that metaphysics is building a list of ingredients that the world is made up of, and that is metaphysics. And that's how one should think about metaphysics. And I do accept this view. I do take it as standard, and I'm building on this view. Okay, this is what I've been taught. This is the school of thought that I belong to. Okay, on the third section, I'm talking about ethics. So there exists the Kantian questions and the idea of duty and the categorical imperative. This is what Kant is all about. He's about ethics. He wanted to derive an ethical principle, basically. He wanted to teach us how to live our lives. And basically, one of his most important questions is, what should we do? Okay, that is Immanuel Kant. That's how you should think about Immanuel Kant. By the way, this is not a profanity. That's the man's question, Immanuel Kant. Okay, so that's section 3. In section 4, I will be talking about empiricism. So I'm distinguishing Kant's thought to empiricism. Okay, so this should be contrasted. Kant says that the sheet of paper that we come with in this world, that's not empty. Empiricism claims that we come in the world with a sheet of paper that is completely blank. Okay, that is empiricism. But, okay, I'm trying to make a statement here. I'm trying to explain to you that empiricism is an epistemic statement. Okay, so empiricism pertains to epistemology. Okay, that is the statement I'm making. Empiricism does not belong to metaphysics, guys. Okay, so in no way empiricism is a metaphysical statement. It belongs to epistemology, and that is the main mistake we're making these days. It is a mistake in categories. Okay, so talking Immanuel Kant, we must be talking categories. Guys, empiricism pertains to epistemology, not to metaphysics. So when I'm taking constructivism too far, okay, when I'm saying that, okay, one isn't born with a gender identity, well, that's taking constructivism too far. That's metaphysics, guys, okay? And I should be sticking to epistemology only when talking empiricism. Okay, so that's a huge mistake we're making today. So let us talk a little bit about Kant as an introduction, as an overview. Immanuel Kant is a thinker. I'm not going to bother you with biographical notes or the context of his work. It is clear that he was bothered by something. It is clear that something did bother Kant. Okay? So some sort of happenings during his times bothered him. So he tried to derive an ethics principle. Okay? He tried to derive formally and rigorously the idea that moral duty is an imperative in human existence. Okay? So that's what Kant tried to do. Yet there exist two threads in Immanuel Kant, and that is the separate threads of metaphysics and ethics. Okay? So, in a way, Kant must develop a metaphysics in order to speak to us about ethics. So that is the reason Kant speaks about metaphysics at length. And you may think his main contribution is in metaphysics, but that's not Immanuel Kant. He is very much about ethics, okay? So, so he must speak about metaphysics in order to derive his ethics. Usually in philosophy, ethics and metaphysics are two different threads, okay? So ethics is not dependent on metaphysics. Metaphysics is very rigorous, ethics isn't. Okay? So it is well known it is well known by people that work in ethics that ethics, it is somewhat hard to derive principles in ethics rigorously or from first principles. Okay, so that is okay. So I'm going to bite the bullet, and I am going to take the bull by the horns on this one, and I'm going to say that metaphysics admit first principles, ethics doesn't. Okay, and you shouldn't necessarily think about Nietzsche when I'm saying this. Okay, Nietzsche spoke to us about Zoroastrianism and Hermeticism. That's the main topic of his Thus Has Spoken Zarathustra. Okay, the death of God. Well, that's a Hermetic principle. Okay, that's how you should think about Nietzsche. Okay, Nietzsche is not about relativism in values. Nietzsche is not about being relativistic about morality. Nietzsche is not some sort of a monster, a mad professor that was an ideologue for bad things. That's not what Nietzsche is. Nietzsche was a philologist that studied Hermeticism and Zoroastrianism and did manage to get a lot of people scandalized by what he said. That is Nietzsche. Okay, so don't think about Nietzsche as a moral relativist. Do not think about ethics as being relative, okay, because it isn't. It isn't. People that work in philosophy do agree that there exist things that are morally reprobable. There exist things that are morally wrong. But in general, ethics doesn't rest on first principles, whereas metaphysics does. So these are two different threads. Even though in Kant they are very much connected. Okay, so in order to say that we have a duty in this world, Kant needs to say that in a way, we construct our own reality. Okay, so that is his idea, the idea of phenomenon. Okay, so what we know comes to us as a phenomenon as opposed to a noumenon, which is the other thing, the thing in itself, the thing that exists out there. So what we perceive is the phenomenon, which is kind of like a pair of glasses on our head. We do construct our reality. So in a way, we are empowered into exercising our duty, and that is his ethics. Okay, so that is basically Immanuel Kant. So for all of you philosophy geeks out there, you definitely must be aware there exists B-Phil, an Oxford B-Phil list of questions. Okay, and these questions are always very stimulating, always very fun. So the Oxford B-Phil questions, they are always very, very fun. Okay, they are comparable to the Millennium list of problems in mathematics. Though I think the Oxford B-Phil questions, they are different every year, and this is Oxford B-Phil caliber type of question. What exactly is the connection between metaphysics and ethics in Immanuel Kant? Explain to us in, say, 5 pages. Okay, so I guess that is a serious philosophical question. Moving on to section 2, the metaphysics and epistemology of Immanuel Kant. I've already covered a little bit of this, so there's no new things that I want to add. So epistemology and metaphysics, they are related, they go hand in hand. The metaphysics is the list of things that the world is made up of. Epistemology refers to the way we get to know these things. In Immanuel Kant is a skeptic. Okay, he's I guess my lecturer would say he's an anti-realist. And that's very true about Immanuel Kant, that he is a skeptic and an anti-realist. He's talking about a thing called phenomenon, and that is what we perceive directly, and it is mind-dependent, and it is dependent on each one of us. It is like a pair of glasses that sits on our heads. It is how we interpret the world. And there exists a thing called noumenon, which is the other thing, the thing in itself, which we can't know. Okay, so there's no way we can know the noumenon. We just interpret the noumenon into a phenomenon. And that is all there is about Kant's metaphysics and epistemology. Okay, so it does get involved. There exist details to this, but in essence, this is what Kant's metaphysics refers to. And since what we know, since everything that we can know is dependent on our minds, we are empowered to exercise an ethics, okay? This is my take on it. So we are definitely empowered into exercising duty and moral responsibility, okay? So that was section 2, metaphysics and epistemology. All right, now we get into the ethics of Immanuel Kant. So Immanuel Kant, in his philosophy, he proposes 4 basic questions. Okay, so he has 4 questions for us. And the questions are, what can I know? Okay. What should I do? What may I hope? And finally, what is a human? What is a man? What is a human being? So here, speaking German may be of help here, because in German we get the concept of Mensch. Okay, so there exists a concept of Mensch. You are a human. You are a human, but you're not. That's not your birthright in German, in the German language. In the German language, being a human, well, that's not your birthright. That's acting responsibly. That's acting morally. That's acting rationally. That is being a human in the German language. So it's quite language dependent. But at the same time, in the thought of Immanuel Kant, being a human is an end in itself. Okay, so what does that mean? It means we shouldn't use human beings. We should not make use of a human being in a bad way. Okay. So being a human is an end in itself. That's a good in itself. It is a good of its own good. Okay, so that is basically the conclusion that Kant reaches through his highly rigorous arguments. Okay. The first question, what can I know? Well, that was explored in the Critique of Pure Reason. And we've touched on that. There's not much that we can know. There's always things that we interpret. Okay? So those are the 4 Kantian questions. What can I know? What should I do? What may I hope? And what is the human? And they are interrelated very much. And also Immanuel Kant derives a principle. He rigorously derives a principle that he calls the categorical imperative, which states that ethics is universal. Okay, so that's what the categorical imperative means. The body of principles, the body of rules that we follow in our lives, in ethics mostly, well, that should be followed by everybody, okay? And I should follow only the rules that everybody else should follow. So in other words, ethics is universal, okay? That is the categorical imperative. Well, it stands in relation to the golden rule, which is, the golden rule was stated by Jesus Christ, most notably, but is a well-known principle in Judaism, and, well, in the Kabbalah too. So, I guess one should do only as they would rather have done unto them. That's kind of like the dual of the categorical imperative, which is actually slightly stronger than the golden rule. So here it is, section 4, the last section, on empiricism these days. Okay, so empiricism has gone nuts these days. Empiricism is viewed as a metaphysics, and that is wrong, people. Empiricism is an epistemology. It is not a metaphysics. Okay, so you're asking me, what is a woman? I am perfectly capable of giving you the answer. So question, what is a woman? Answer, a woman is that human animal that is due to hormones and pheromones different to the human male. Okay, so the woman is that human animal that is hormonally different to a human male and presents features of sexual dimorphism that are totally different to the human male. The human animal being a creature, a creation that in which dimorphism is quite visible and quite obvious. And in addition to this, in a human woman, in a female, there exists a somewhat different phenomenology. So there exists a different spirituality and a different emotion component in a woman as opposed to a human man, a human male. Okay, so that is what a woman is. Okay, a woman is easily distinguishable due to sexual dimorphism, and a woman has a different phenomenology to a man. Okay, that is very simple. Okay, so, and furthermore, we are endowed with gender when we are born. Gender is assigned by birth. Okay, so you shouldn't think of gender as something that you may choose for yourself, because that is wrong, guys. Okay, so whether or not you had a chakra attack in kindergarten, that doesn't that fact does not allow you to choose your gender. Okay, so if somebody attacked your chakras, your root chakras and your chest chakra in kindergarten, as early as kindergarten, well, that doesn't make you prone to choosing your genders. Okay, that's a mistake in categories. That's totally different. Okay, so we have gone crazy with constructivism. Okay, we are nuts these days. We are simply going off the rails. There's nothing rigorous about this type of thought. Why am I speaking empiricism here? Well, empiricism should be contrasted to Kantianism. Kantianism says we have something, we have that pair of glasses. That's what we have. That's what we're endowed with. That's what every human, every person that exercises reason, we have that pair of glasses through which we interpret the noumenon. That's what we have. That's what we come in the world with. Empiricism states that we come in the world as a blank sheet of paper and everything should be filled in. Okay, so, and if we think about empiricism as a metaphysics, we get in a weird form of constructivism that proposes a weird form of gender ideology and queer theory and so on and so forth. And it's a weird interpretation of Nietzsche. Okay, so when I'm building an ethics for myself, when I interpret the world, I'm exercising my will for power. And that's not what Nietzsche is. That's not what Nietzsche said. Nietzsche deployed the concept of will for power as sort of an explanation for men being cruel towards other men, which is a aspect of Hermeticism. Okay, that's what Nietzsche talked about. Nietzsche was a philologist that talked about Hermeticism and Zoroastrianism. That's who Nietzsche was. Okay, so we're getting into a very weird type of constructivism, which is very far from correct. Okay, so I guess, constructivism says that nothing is correct. Basically, all is exercising will for power. Well, yeah, but when I'm being nihilistic, I also deny the denial. Okay, so a nihilist also denies the denial. So yeah, you should be a little bit careful when exercising this form of nihilism. Okay, so when I'm saying constructivism is correct, that is a meta statement about constructivism. So when I'm proposing constructivism, I'm automatically saying constructivism is correct, and you should think about constructivism as being correct. Well, that's a little bit of a contradiction because constructivism itself states that nothing is correct. So that's about it. Guys, think about it like this. Constructivism, in a way, it is correct, but there exist aspects about our human reality which are not constructive. Okay? So parts of constructivism are correct. Our politics, the fact that in some countries there exist only two parties, the left and the right. The fact that in the French parliament, the communists or the socialists sit on the left and the liberals sit on the right. Okay, these are constructive. architecture is constructive. Okay, the way our buildings are made up of, the kind of brick we're using, the kind of material we're using, the kind of insulation we're using. These have to do with constructivism and multiple realizability. Okay, that sort of stuff is constructive. Yes, I'm not saying it isn't, but there do exist things in our human reality which aren't constructive. It is morally reprobable to kill a human being. It is morally reprobable to steal. It is morally reprobable to lie. It is morally reprobable to act destructive. Okay? These principles are not constructive.